What's up, everybody? The Knights of Den are back for the first time since Demaryius Thomas was traded to the Houston Texans. Feels like it's been forever, but you know what? It's only been over the course of the season. It's only been about a month. And so, Brandon, it's great to be back. It's great to be talking Denver Broncos football on and off the field. I love the offseason. You know me, but it's just great to be talking with you again, man.
It is. And it doesn't feel like, despite it only being a month, doesn't it seem like there's been so many like different seasons that we just passed through?
Yeah.
In that short span of time. It's wild. But yeah, good to be back with you, bud.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun episode. I think that we've got a lot of topics to discuss tonight, both on and off the field for the Broncos. Obviously, they lost to the Cleveland Browns most recently. Whenever you're listening to this is fresh off of the Cleveland loss, the first loss to Cleveland since 1990, and I believe it's the first Broncos home loss to the Browns in 46 years.
Yep.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, I know Baker's good, but I mean, you can't score 18 points against Cleveland at home. Yep. What a bummer.
Not when you don't go for it fourth down.
I want to talk about that a little bit because this is going to be a heavy emphasis in this episode. We're going to be talking a lot about Vance Joseph, and rightly so, because the Broncos are potentially getting ready to make a switch at the head coach spot. And it's decisions like that really paved the way for this kind of thing to happen. So give me your thoughts on that specific play. Lay that situation out for maybe people who need it refreshed in their minds or what have you, but lay that situation out and give me your thoughts.
Well, you know, when we're down by more than a touchdown and we're within 5 minutes of the end of the fourth quarter and it's 4th and 1, and we're supposed to be a good running team, which I know that they've been able to stack the box more against us without Emmanuel Sanders and DT. But man, to kick the field goal right there, I think just harkens too many Broncos fans back to foxball and to overly conservative football. And when you're looking, I don't remember where I was listening to it today. It might have been I was listening to Mile High Sports Radio, but somebody was talking about, we just watched on Thursday Night Football the Chargers go for 2 and go for it on 4th and succeeding in those scenarios. And it made the juxtaposition between us and them a lot sharper. Is seeing young coaches going for it and having the stones to, you know, put it on the line. And also I heard today, I think from the same place, there was fans will be more forgiving if you go for it on 4th and fail than not going for it at all and then still failing. That's going to stick and linger a lot longer, is fans want to see you at least took the risk and gambled. It pumps them up. They get stoked. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, and maybe it's not the best in every situation. But when it's not like this is the first time we've seen that recently from our string of head coaches, nor is it the first time we've seen it just from Vance. So to be in, we're hurting right now for our Broncos fan base from like that, seeing all these other good young coaches out there. And I know I always text you, I'm always like, would McVay have kicked it right there? You know, or you know, Anthony Lynn most recently with that Charger game. But it's like, that's my standard now, is like, I want that, you know, and these young guys can come in with that type of aggression, and they really just control the game. They implement their will upon the game. We've talked about that a lot in Knights of Den, just with quarterbacks, you know, wanting quarterbacks to go in and establish themselves and you know, take the Baker, you know, I don't know, not charisma, but that just, I don't know, that willpower to go in and make the game yours and take it over. And you get the feeling that regardless of whether Case wanted to go for it, that was a Vance decision, a philosophical Vance decision, that we're going to kick the field goal in that situation. And we ended up losing, you know, and coming up short and not being, it's like somebody in the Twitter comments of something today also, I don't know where I saw it, but was like, okay, so you trust your offense to go 70 yards later to get the field goal. but you don't trust the offense to go one more yard when they're already in the red zone to pick up the fourth. I mean, man, I'd much rather lose that way. I'd much rather lose that way.
Gosh, that's so true. That's the perspective to have in this, I mean, everybody, who grew up playing Madden knows you go for it on fourth down. There's no stakes in Madden, but when the stakes are involved, I think, obviously you second guess that a little bit more. But look at, like you mentioned that Chargers game, Anthony Lynn, he's not playing with house money. He's playing for a number 1 seed. And he's going out and acting like he's playing for a number 1 seed.
He's not playing scared. They just did that to the Chiefs. They just did
in
that
Kansas
to the
City,
Chiefs.
Right?
In Kansas. Wow. Right.
I mean, who does that? Who does that? I mean, first of all, to go in and come back from down 14 with less than 4 or 5 minutes left, that's putting faith in both your offense and your defense. And you put your faith in your offense to exploit those matchups. Look at the Chiefs defense over the course of the year. They've been terrible in coverage all year. So what did the Chargers do? They exploited the coverage, and they specifically exploited it on the biggest play of their season right now. And I think ultimately, that's going to earn the Chargers the number 1 seed in the AFC, is that they really put the Kansas City Chiefs in their place to say, look, we can beat you guys at your own game. We can sling the ball around the yard. We can sling it to multiple different targets. We can make big plays downfield. We can go for 2. We've got creative offensive tactics. They beat the Chiefs at their own game. The Andy Reid, he's the head coach of the year. He's done such a great job with a second-year quarterback. Well, look at what the Chargers have done. I mean, Anthony Lynn down there making all the right moves, and of course, it's nice to have a Phillip Rivers. It's nice to have a Patrick Mahomes. The Broncos don't have that. But when you have the opportunity to win a game, you don't have to look at things all the time like a baseball manager. And I've been watching so much baseball over the past couple of years that I've noticed this about baseball managers, is the fact that they have these huge stat books every single game. And more than any other sport, I think that in baseball you can play tendencies. You can play the tendencies of opposing pitchers. You can say, well, this guy does this against left-handed batters, so we're gonna put this pitcher in the game. You can't do that in football, and Vance Joseph's trying to do that. He's probably thinking like, well, over the course of the game, we've averaged this on, runs within, blah, 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 all these different splits. He's overthinking it. He's overthinking it. Just go get a yard.
He's definitely an overthinker. We know enough of Vance to know that he's an overthinker. So it wasn't from a lack of thinking. It certainly wasn't from a lack of thinking. You don't see too much of that from Vance. He always seems to have a reason behind what he does. The guy's not dumb, but he made the wrong decision. And in that moment, it seems to be more instinct and prowess is what he was lacking. And in that moment, you take your Denver Broncos and you freaking take that 4th and 1 and you take your playoff spot. And there was not that mentality that we wanted. And that is why he continues to be out of sync with freaking Denver Broncos fans, in my opinion.
Right. I completely agree with that. I think that the players are kind of starting to jump off that ship. I mean, if they hadn't already, you can see it physically. You can hear it in the things that they're saying after the games. You can hear it in the things they're saying during the week. I mean, just look at Von Miller's press conference when he's talking about getting scolded for going off sides.
Right.
3 times in that San Francisco game. Like, Von Miller can go off sides every now and again. I don't think he has too many penalties. Like, he's not averaging a penalty a game or anything ridiculous like that. He got caught a couple times, and even Vaughn doesn't have to, he shouldn't feel obligated to have to explain that. But then when he explained, like, hey, I didn't think they were going to use a dummy count with 12 seconds left in the half. I mean, well, that makes sense. I mean, why would you use a dummy count as the clock is running down at the end of the half? Like, that doesn't really, I mean, I can see where he'd be justified in maybe taking a little guess that the ball's going to be snapped. So there's different things where I don't understand calling out your players like that. Although I do agree, I mean, nobody's above accountability, but I don't understand calling out your players like that. Then you had Joe Woods come out and say some things about some of his players defensively as well that just kind of irk you. And it kind of seems like there's like this guild in the coaching room, like the guys are talking about the players and like how they need to hold each other accountable. And this is what we're going to say to the media today and how we're going to challenge our players publicly. Like, I just kind of get that weird, like that
It's
vibe
awkward.
from them.
It's
Yeah,
all
it is.
awkward. It's all awkward right now. Just about every facet from top to bottom of this organization is awkward.
Yeah. It definitely feels that way, and it's headed towards an end. I mean, I don't think there's been any clear point in time where it feels like Vance Joseph's time in Denver is going to be done. Last year around this time, I mean, we're kind of throwing that option around and saying, well, he needs to win 2 of his final 3 games in order to stay the head coach, and he actually did that, and then they did keep him. But this rumor, this bombshell, it's not even a rumor, it's a report, a confirmed report from multiple reputable sources,
Unanimously confirmed by everybody but Mike Kliss.
unanimously confirmed by everyone but Mike Kliss. That that sounds about right. So in case you haven't read, or in case you haven't been on Twitter or where, I mean, I don't
In
know
case you've
when.
been living under a rock, and
Yeah, in case you've been, I didn't want to say it, but
follows
you
the
did.
Browns game.
Exactly. Yeah, if you've been wallowing since the Browns game and missed this. So the report is, and this first came from Woody Page, and he said that he confirmed this with at least 5 sources. Is that what he wrote? Something like that. So essentially what he said is that a year ago around this time, John Elway and Mike Shanahan met privately, secretly, and according to another report, that meeting involved a potential 3-year deal for Mike Shanahan to return to the Denver Broncos as their head coach, as shocking as that may sound. And the plan was for Shanahan to bring Kirk Cousins along with him. And Cousins has, I mean, he has never said a negative word about Mike Shanahan, I don't think, in his life. He loves Mike Shanahan. He's a guy who gave him his first chance in the NFL, and Kirk Cousins really highly regards him because of that. And so it was going to be potentially this package deal of Mike Shanahan as the head coach, Gary Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, Kirk Cousins as the quarterback, and everybody just kind of gelling. I mean, that sounds like a great thing on paper, especially in hindsight. And the
It
person
seems
who
like
shut,
that in the hearts and minds
yeah,
of the Broncos fans, which is who you're doing this for. Is to, in a way, it's like, it's similar to the getting the band back together with the Kubiak situation initially, and bringing all those ex-coaches back. And we saw how that went, and we got a ring. So it's like, to be able to, and looking, and now hindsight's 2020, of course, but doesn't it seem like that scenario was an upgrade in every single facet of the scenario?
it really does. I mean, it makes no sense to me why that idea would have been shut down, especially coming off of the season that they had in 2017, where it looked like everything really needed to be blown up. It looked like the team needed a new quarterback. It looked like they needed new direction at the head coaching position. And that seems like a pretty clear upgrade, like you said, across the board. I mean, you're upgrading at offensive coordinator with Kubiak coming down from his head. You know, he was the head coach of the team, of the Super Bowl team, and he was a great offensive coordinator in his time. And dating back to even the most recent time that he was offensive coordinator, I think that was one of Joe Flacco's best years in Baltimore. And so that was something that would have been pretty amazing. And then I think what's really interesting to me about this, Brandon, is the fact that throughout the season, there was this rumor that popped up about Gary Kubiak wanting to get back involved as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. And
Now that makes a bit more sense.
that makes a lot more sense now, because
This
initially,
story is the missing link, and there's still a lot of, there's so much context, there's so much inside stuff we don't know, but this story connected a lot of dots of the unknown, and separate pieces that didn't really seem to fit together. It's like, this is the missing story that we finally were given last night in the middle of the night, that makes so much stuff make sense.
It does. It's fascinating. And you were listening to something earlier on Mile High Sports, giving some more details about this. So kind of share with us what you learned from that, and how it kind of adds some context.
And first, to the people that don't know what's going on, you did say the first part of it, and that Elway wanted Shanahan. Shanahan wanted Kirk Cousins. That seemed to be a trifecta that was all in agreement, and it was vetoed. This is the story. It was vetoed by Joe Ellis.
Yep.
President of the team. Now, He is the leader of the trifecta, the trust, the Broncos trust, which is basically acting as proxy for Pat Bowlen's estate until they find a replacement of either a Bowlen or they sell the team, which they're in some weird middle ground between that. It's all basically a Game of Thrones plot that's going on right now between Bolen's family and the trust with some of Bolen's family. There's a lot of infighting. There's a lot of complicated, crazy stuff that's going on. A lot of it we can only theorize about because we don't know and don't have the inside information. But there's also a lot of reporters who have been leaking out some of the stuff that's been going on. And obviously we have this big court case that's happening with Pat Bowlen's brother and one of Pat Bowlen's daughters against the trust, who wants another one of the daughters. So there's so much stuff and so much to unravel. But this story is so mind-boggling, and it's such a game changer that it came out into the public consciousness, because apparently a lot of reporters have known that this happened. But it was Woody, crazy Woody, man. I love Woody. Crazy Woody, dude. Wild Woody, dude. I don't know if that's a hashtag, but it freaking should be. Wild Woody. And I've always loved listening to Woody and reading his articles because it's his own thing. He's got his own style, he's not running interference for the team. He's not doing the Kliss thing, which I know I talked a lot in the previous episode about. There is a value in what Mike Kliss does. But for the sake of things like this, where we're trying to figure out what's going on, Mike Kliss isn't helping. Right. And Woody Page just freaking put a shot into the dark and opened up the chasm into the underworld as far as all the things that we've been wanting to know and that the fans didn't know and that all these reporters secretly knew. It's now public consciousness, and we now see that freaking worm tongue Joe Ellis is the one that's been pulling the strings and potentially manipulating what's been going on and what we've been frustrated about for a long time. And so if we look back at what Joe Ellis has done, he steps in and leads the trust and fires Mike Shanahan. Then he hires Josh McDaniels. And then when Elway wanted to come back and be a part of the team and run things financially, being that he had an economics degree, Ellis blocked him out. Ellis didn't want John Elway coming into that capacity. Then when they had to fire Josh McDaniels because it proved to be an absolute disaster, he then later, when the team was in turmoil, brought John Elway back. Reluctantly, he brought John Elway back. And to be honest, the best thing that Joe Ellis has done for the Denver Broncos so far has been to bring John Elway back to the team. Right. Because the good things that have happened since then have been because of John Elway. The only seemingly good thing in Ellis's run that's happened that wasn't John Elway's doing was the drafting of Tim Tebow. For those Tebow fans of us, that John Elway didn't have anything to do with that, and that's one of my favorite things. But Joe Ellis has not. He seems to now be Bronco fan public enemy number one after this. He has. That was the backstory before. That's what we already knew about Joe Ellis, was that he fired Shanahan, hired Josh McDaniels, and then blocked Elway out from coming back to the team. Elway has not had a great relationship with Joe Ellis. Joe Ellis brought John back because he had to, because the Broncos need and at that time, if I remember correctly, I think Pat was involved in the recruiting of bringing John to come and salvage the situation. Yep. If I remember correctly, is one of the last, lucid times or somewhat lucid times for Pat. And he wanted that. He wanted John to come in and help. And he did. And John Elway has been the one that's restored things. So to come and catch up to now, where there's we've talked about the Broncos fans that have been down on Elway and have been calling for Elway to be fired. This article that came out really vindicates Elway in a lot of ways, and it should vindicate him to the fans that are looking for a villain. And maybe Vance wasn't enough of a villain for certain fans. They needed more. They needed the guy that brought Vance into the building, which we will, I'm sure, in a moment, get into the hiring of Vance and what could have happened at that point in time. But so we hire Vance. It doesn't work out. And John Elway wants to cut loose from Vance and wants to bring back Mike Shanahan and therefore bring in Kirk Cousins and have a quarterback, which seemed to be the piece that we were missing, that we were thirsting for in the offseason. So to bring back Mike, to get rid of Vance, to bring in Kirk, and that Joe Ellis, for personal reasons, vetoes Mike coming back. This is not a decision that was made for the betterment of the Broncos. This was not a decision that was being evaluated for, oh no, Mike isn't the best thing for the organization. This was Joe Ellis, the guy that fired Mike Shanahan, not wanting Mike to come back. And what Les said on Mile High Sports was that Shanahan, after agreeing to a 3-year deal with John Elway, an underhand, no paper contract, verbal agreement that they made when they met and talked for 6 to 8 hours at Elway's house about the future and came to the conclusion that Shanahan's going to be the next Broncos coach. Shanahan said upon leaving, according to Les, that Shanahan said, I don't think Ellis is going to be okay with this. And obviously paraphrasing that. But Shanahan told John, I don't think this is going to fly with Ellis. And sure enough, Ellis shut it down. That is fascinating, and it changes a lot. It changes our perception of Elway. It changes our understanding of why Vance is still here. It changes the trust situation of this battle, because the stance that the trust has taken is that we're doing what's best for the Broncos.
That's exactly the opposite of what the Bolin family has said, and they've been made to look almost like crazy people in the eyes of the public.
Because the trust has the high ground.
Yep.
The trust has the team, and they have the high ground. They're the ones that can use Bronco Twitter to put out an official statement that makes them look like the Broncos themselves are saying this. They're able to speak out of the horse's mouth to us. And we receive it as the official word of the Broncos, talking down to the Bolins that are fighting this and trying to regain control. That's fascinating. So the fact that they took that defensive stance and said, we're doing what's best for the Broncos, this article, if believed to be true, which is not being denied by anyone substantial, anyone trusted, is saying that they made a move because of ego. That Ellis, who 98% of Broncos fans couldn't name another person in the trust. I would imagine maybe 95%, something like that. Ellis is the face of the trust. Ellis is the headship of the team. And for us to learn that, we can't blame Elway for making bad GM decisions, because apparently his hands are tied by Ellis. And they made a decision, not what's best for the Broncos, like the defensive stance that they're taking, but what Ellis felt most comfortable with because of his own personal reasonings of not wanting him, even though Broncos fans like Shanahan a whole lot more than they like Ellis.
Yep.
That's huge.
Is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And I had to look just to make sure, because John Elway signed a 5-year contract extension, but that was a year ago, two Julys ago. So July 2017. So all of this happened within a year and a half of that, roughly, or a year, actually 6 months after that was the interview with Shanahan. He gave it 1 season with VJ. So this is, I mean, where do you even start with this? This is the juiciest story.
The biggest story that's come out the Broncos in 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's absolutely humongous, because it involves Mike Shanahan, first of all. It's not like John Elway met secretively with any other coach. He specifically went to the guy that he won Super Bowls with. That's something that I think that a lot of Broncos fans need to really learn. If they don't appreciate about Elway, I think you need to learn to appreciate this about Elway. He's going back to the well, not for nostalgia's sake. He's going back to this well with people who have proven they can win in Denver. They can win titles together. They've won titles together.
And they know what it means to win like the Broncos win.
Yes.
They know what it means. That they know what the culture means. They know what this place means. They know the standard of excellence. That to me is a huge deal, that Vance just has never meshed with who we are as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
He's never fit that type that we need. And so, yes, absolutely agree with that.
I think that looking at this from the perspective of the hiring of Vance back in 2017. So with this,
so let's go back a little bit.
So with this knowledge in mind of Ellis, kind of being that voice that pushed Pat Bowlen, who it was a tear. I'll never forget that press conference because that was right when I started doing some sports writing. Was around the time the Broncos hired Josh McDaniels and fired Mike Shanahan. I will never forget that press conference with a teary-eyed Mike Shanahan, a teary Pat Bowlen. That was the hardest decision I bet you Pat Bowlen has ever had to make in his time with the Broncos. The most difficult parting of ways he ever had to make, because that was Mike Shanahan. That's the guy who.
I wonder who would greatly influence that decision. That kind of convinced Pat that Mike needed to go.
Because whose choice was Josh McDaniels?
Ellis.
Exactly.
Who fired Shanahan? Ellis.
Exactly. Yep. And
He's
so
freaking worm tongue talking to the king. I'm telling you, man. Somebody posted that today in response to I was like, I forget what I said. I tweeted something and somebody just posted that meme picture of worm tongue just whispering into the king. Dude, I'm telling you, man, he seems like he's been I don't want to say, I don't know enough about Ellis to say he's a bad person, but if we're structuring this story in the ways that we do here on the Knights of Den and turning this into this like mythological storybook kind of scenario, it seems, and it's gonna seem in fan consciousness and fan awareness, which means a lot whether it's true or not. The way fans perceive the team and the situation is substantial, and it's going to affect things greatly. We now have a great villain within the gates that we didn't even know we had until that article dropped. And maybe some people did, but Broncos fans, by and large, I mean, I had fair weather Bronco fan friends of mine that were all texting me that article today, pissed that we didn't have Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
This is going to strike a major chord in dissatisfied Bronco fans. And when you dig into the article in any substantial measure, you're going to first see, wait, Elway almost did this? Well, why didn't he? And then you look and you see that there is a freaking dragon standing in the way, and his name is Joe Ellis. And then you look back into the history and see that Ellis fired him in the first place and was responsible for McDaniels. And then it becomes clear that you're like, oh my gosh, it's been him the whole time. He's the reason. So, I mean, again, that may not all be true, but that's the way that most Bronco fans are going to read this.
Exactly. And it brings me that context right there brings me back to the 2017 discussion when the Broncos did not choose for Gary Kubiak to step down. They actually, John Elway I don't know if I guess I wasn't privy to the conversation, but I don't know if argue is the right word, but he tried to convince Kubiak to stay on, and Kubiak simply couldn't do it. I mean, I'm sure his wife wasn't allowing him to do that. I can only imagine, being that his health was the way that it was. We all remember he had to miss some games. It was a scary situation. And he had health issues dating back to his time in Houston. It was part of the reason why he said, while he was with the Baltimore Ravens, he said that he wasn't going to interview for any head coaching jobs, and Denver was the only one that he even considered. And so when he was hired by the Broncos, it was just, hey, I'll take this one job. That's the only one that I'll take.
Yeah.
And so when that kind of fizzled out after 2016, and it was kind of clear that the Broncos needed to make some changes, and maybe Kubiak didn't want to fire Rick Dennison or whatever the case may be, the fact of the matter is the Broncos didn't want Kubiak to step down. There were a lot of fans calling for Kubiak to be fired, which is crazy. I mean, that's how much we hate losing. I remember reading on my Twitter, a lot of fans wanted Kubiak fired. And I think even I, in my frustration, said, like, this guy's not the coach for this particular team. He was the coach for 2015. But I mean, I overreact sometimes too, don't get me wrong. But that led us to the 2017 coaching search, where Vance Joseph was coming off his first year being a defensive coordinator. And of course, the Broncos, the context with Joseph and Denver, is the fact that they wanted him to be the defensive coordinator of the 2015 team
before Wade Phillips.
before
So
Wade Phillips.
basically, to those listening that don't understand this, it was the first choice of John Elway was to bring in Vance Joseph as DC back then, and the Bengals wouldn't allow him out of the contract. And so we got Wade Phillips instead, which was great.
It was great.
That was
And
ended up being a great consolation prize.
I don't think anybody's going to forgive John Elway for letting Wade Phillips out the door.
Nope.
Or,
yeah.
I mean, that's one of the unforgivable sins he's committed, I guess, to this point. But
hard to defend that. Yeah.
Hard to defend it. Everybody loves Wade. But Vance Joseph comes in for the interview in 2017, having that edge, apparently, of being this coveted coach that they couldn't have back in 2015. He was kind of somebody that, Gary Kubiak obviously respected him. He worked for Kubiak in Houston as a defensive backs coach, and he was just widely respected by Kubiak and his staff. And so it was assumed kind of from the beginning, if you remember, it wasn't that long ago, but I remember, I don't think there was really any moment where the reporters in Denver were saying anything but it's probably Vance Joseph. It's Vance Joseph's job to lose. I remember Cliff saying like Vance Joseph is the favorite in the house.
Fans wanted Shanahan 2. They wanted 2.0. Wanted little Shanny. I remember that. But it did seem like that was like, wait, why aren't we hearing about any more about Shanahan getting the job? But then it was pretty clear from the media and from inside the organization that it was going to be Vance. You're right. I do remember that.
Yeah. And so at that time, Kyle Shanahan was making public statements. I was looking through some old tweets today. He was making public statements about the Broncos job is probably the best job available. He would love to be considered for the Broncos job. It would be an honor for him to work for the Denver Broncos. He was really hoping for the Broncos job to come through. And that sentiment was reciprocated by 99% of the Denver Broncos fan base. I'm sure there was that 1% out there who thought that it would be cool to go out of the Shanahan box for whatever reason. But think about all the positives in Shanahan's favor at the time. He was coming off of a great year with the Atlanta Falcons. They made the Super Bowl. They had that big lead on the Patriots, and he was the hot shot offensive coordinator, 37 years old at the time.
He gave Matt Ryan his best year.
Yeah, Matt Ryan's best year.
He'll probably Matt Ryan never played at that level before that, and he probably never will again.
Exactly.
At the level that he did when he had Shanahan calling his plays.
Exactly. And it made so much sense with Denver having a great defense at the time to say, you know what, you come in, Kyle, you fix the offense. We got a young quarterback. If that doesn't work out, we'll get you a new quarterback.
Bring in the son of our fans' favorite coach.
Bring him in. Yeah, give us that same nostalgic feeling that we had with Gary Kubiak, and bring in the most qualified young offensive mind in the game. Bring him in to be the coach of the team that he grew up on the sidelines with. I mean, how cool of a story would that have been?
Not to mention Shanahan's style is so similar. Big Shanahan's style was so similar to Kubiak. Their styles merged, playing together and doing or coaching together. And then Kyle Shanahan coaching under his dad, derived a lot from his dad. So how smooth of a transition would it have been from whatever Kubiak was doing to whatever Kyle Shanahan was probably going to do?
Yeah. Seamless. It seems like it would have been seamless. And Kyle Shanahan's system was really just an evolved system of what Mike had run for many, many years. Obviously, the zone blocking scheme became really famous with the Denver Broncos because they were so good at it. But that was something that he ran a lot of in Atlanta, and he's doing the same thing with the 49ers now. And he's just a great tactician of the game. I mean, we saw it firsthand when the Broncos just got beat by the 49ers. He took
with the worst team.
The worst team that they've played all year. He took the biggest weakness on Denver's defense, and he exploited the crap out of it to the tune of 200 some odd yards for George Kittle in the first half. And even Nick Mullins is sitting there saying that he couldn't believe how wide open these receivers were. Right. And it's because of Shanahan's game planning. And it's not that the 49ers are undefeated by any means. Like, they've obviously lost games. They've failed to compete in some games because of injuries or whatever.
Beat us with a third string quarterback and honestly a less talented team. Now our D was pretty beat up. We're missing some veterans. We were pretty wounded. But at the same time, he had a worse team, and he beat us with the worst team.
He
That
did.
was what a sharp juxtaposition where Vance Joseph had more to work with and lost to the guy that we should have hired over him that had less to work
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm. And that brings me to the overall point in saying all this. Why was Kyle Shanahan not hired by the Denver Broncos? He wanted to be there. He was borderline overqualified for what we needed. I mean, you talk about a missing piece to the equation. You've got an elite defense. You've got a great defensive coordinator. Bring him back. Bring the pieces on defense back. This offensive mastermind. Instead, you go for Vance Joseph, who the Dolphins defense wasn't very good in his only year as their coordinator. It just wasn't. And he's got this reputation as being a leader of men. That was what we heard about for him coming in.
And that right there, from what I heard today and from what I understand of the situation, is that Vance was perceived by Elway to have a better chance at leading a locker room of veterans. And it was the only hang up that Elway had with Kyle. So like you said earlier, it seemed to be assumed by the media and everybody involved that Vance was going to get the job. And from what I heard again today and before, from what I can remember from wherever I've heard it, Elway also wanted Vance from previously wanting him, but that the interview went so well with Kyle Shanahan that it gave him serious consideration of maybe we should go with Kyle. That was a great interview. That was even the reports that came out after that was that they had a great interview. A really great interview. It was emphasized. And then what happened when they first announced Vance as coach? They emphasized the leader of men thing, which seemed to be the one dividing, the one maybe singular thing that Elway anchored to that maybe validated his decision, or whoever's decision it was, that this is why we're going with this guy, is he's going to be a leader of men.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that that's absolutely true, that the only hang up that Elway had with Kyle was that maybe he was too young to be able to handle a room full of vets. So that I think it should be stated in there and should be put in there into this, equation as we try to figure this out. Now, the question with today's breaking news and specifically Ellis blocking out Father Shanahan was, is there something to do with Elway or with Ellis's dislike of Mike that may have influenced the not hiring of Kyle? What do you think about that?
To be honest with you, with all the pieces that are coming out around that, I wouldn't. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. To be honest, I feel like that's actually a highly likely thing, because there was simply, this is the thing that really got me interested about it, was the fact that Kyle Shanahan came out and said during the interviewing process that he wanted to be the Denver Broncos coach. Basically, I mean, in so many words, he said, I want that job. That's the job that I want. That's the most attractive job.
Why wouldn't he? So why wouldn't he?
Why wouldn't he?
He's the son of the guy that already won 2 Super Bowls here. He's obviously not afraid of living in anybody's shadow, which is a great trait.
Yep.
And he wants to come back to the team that his dad coached. And he wasn't afraid of there not being a quarterback. He thought he could get probably Kirk, that he was also familiar with from Washington as well. He thought he could get, fix that problem and come in and reestablish Denver Broncos football, because he knew it, because he was raised around it. So of course, if you come off this amazing offensive coordinator situation where you proved that you can give, I wouldn't say Matt Ryan's a mediocre quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but you turn a good quarterback into a great quarterback, and you took your team to the Super Bowl, and you had a ridiculous lead against the Pats that you guys just blew. but you almost blew
Mhm.
out the Pats in the Super Bowl. That was almost the storyline. Obviously, almost doesn't count for too much, but that was almost the storyline. Why wouldn't you want to take your first head coaching job in the place that your dad is a legend, where everyone loves your father, at least the fans, apparently not the president? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't you want to come and take that dream job? Of course he was stoked for the Broncos position.
Right. He was stoked for it, and then fast forward to roughly 2 years later, and all these same reporters are asking him questions about the interviewing process with Denver. And what did he have to say just a couple weeks ago? I think this is so interesting. I'm going to paraphrase here, but he said essentially that his gut feeling was that he was only going to finish second place in that race for the Broncos head coaching position.
Hmm.
That is interesting to me. Why would you feel in your gut that you're going to finish second place? You wanted that job. That was the job that
Sounds like you
you
knocked the
coveted.
interview out of the park too.
So he knocked the interview out of the park. Did the whole interview process regardless of that gut feeling. And yet here we are still. He feels in hindsight feels like he knew in his gut all along that he was never going to finish higher than second.
Is it similar to the gut feeling that Mike Shanahan had when he accepted a 3-year deal with John Elway and told him before he left that I have a
Mm,
feeling that Ellis isn't going to like this?
I wish you could see the grin on my face as you made that point. Wow. That
Right?
is that is right on point. That's exactly what
And,
it
and
it's
again, guys, we can only surmise these things because we weren't there at the deals. We don't
right.
know, and no one know. Even the people that know a lot more and are leaking out a lot of this stuff, they don't know. A lot of them are surmising a lot of this stuff, which leads me to another very interesting thing. John Elway and his potential involvement in this story.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts, if any, on it, whatever role John may or may not have played in this getting out?
I think that it's an interesting dilemma for Elway because he has by all for anything that we know, he has the most control of the Broncos up until this point. I mean, he has the final say in pretty much anything. But I can't help but
So we
wonder.
thought.
Yeah, so we thought, but I can't help but wonder if Ellis has this ultimate trump card that involves Pat Bowlen somehow, some way, or if he has some sort of I don't want to call it blackmail. That makes it sound so devious. We're talking about football here, but we're also talking about a lot of money. We're talking about people's livelihoods, people's reputations, and you never know what people are going to do in these situations. So I just wonder what he has on Elway that he would be able to put the kibosh on such big moves. If it was Kyle Shanahan as the number one choice, what personal vendetta could possibly give Joe Ellis that trump card. I mean, I'm trying to think it through in my head right now, but I think that Elway maybe he's obviously got to take some of the fault for this. I mean, he wanted Vance Joseph part of the interview
Oh,
process as
for sure.
well.
For sure.
He was
So no one is blameless in this
no,
scenario.
no,
No
absolutely not.
one's Shanahan's not blameless, or Mike. Kyle's probably blameless. I
Right.
don't think
Yeah.
Kyle did anything wrong.
Kyle
But
didn't do
Mike's
anything.
Mike's not blameless. Ellis for sure isn't blameless, and Elway's not blameless. Elway
Hmm.
still drafted Paxton Lynch. There's still all of that. There's still a lot of different ways you can look at this as far as people. We're not thinking Joe Ellis is this whole total criminal that's caused all of this for sure. I absolutely think that that Elway needs to take a bit of responsibility for this, and I think he has. But part of where this would lead me is that, or where I was going with this is this seems to vindicate Elway and a lot of the negative
Yeah.
perception surrounding his general manager abilities by saying, "Hey guys, I didn't make this decision. I had a different plan. I didn't get to make my plan." And
Hmm.
for some of this confirmation to come out as far as people in the building talking about who else would know that Elway and Shanahan had came to a 3-year agreement besides whoever Elway and Shanahan told,
Yeah.
and so it's just I know there's probably people beneath Elway. It didn't have to be Elway. I'm not saying Elway leaked the story. That would obviously, it'd be interesting. I'm not saying he didn't leak the story, but
Yeah.
it definitely helps Elway This story makes Elway look good. It makes him look better. It raises his stock and it lowers Ellis's stock and redirects the attention of the mob, the pitchfork mob, toward Ellis's house and away from John Elway's steakhouse.
Oh, I love it. You're gonna show up at the steakhouse with pitchforks.
Kill the beast.
Kill the beast.
You know, I'm telling you, man, like this is fascinating. And, you know, going forward, because I've also been getting texts from people today like, oh, so does this mean we have a chance of getting Mike? And that's where, dude, it's who knows where this goes from here, because my instinct is to say no. Not at all, because that was something we wanted to happen, but obviously Ellis is blocking it out. And but then again, now that fans know that we almost had Mike and the Ellis blocked it, and Ellis is going to know that the fans are going to be, they're not going to let go of this.
No.
Ellis is barely in the spotlight. Ellis is barely around. Ellis doesn't get enough face time and time in front. He comes out in major events and says stuff and usually passes the mic to the person it's about. So what opportunities is Ellis even going to have to save face? Or is he going to be regarded as the villain for a while now that this is out and these dots have been connected? I don't see a way Ellis recovers his reputation amongst fans after this.
Not unless he gives that control back to John Elway.
So who benefits?
John Elway. This is the biggest power move I think we've ever seen from John Elway.
This might have been the most baller Elway move that Elway's ever made.
Elway just went for it on 4th and 1, down by 4.
Yeah, he did.
He was facing an offseason full of questions about his ability to pick quarterbacks, to pick coaches. That focus has completely shifted.
So one of the things Les was saying is that the relationship between Ellis and John has iced over. And part of that connects to the context that I said earlier about Ellis first blocked out John from coming back. Remember, keep that in mind. Ellis didn't want Elway to return in a financial he wanted to help with the cap. He wanted to help with, managing salary cap, managing finances. He wanted to use his economics degree to help the team that he loved, and he was blocked out. Broncos fans should be irritated at that alone. And I wasn't around and conscious of all this stuff to pay close enough attention when this was all going on initially, when Elway wanted to return to the team. And I know that there was some clashes and conflicts between John and Mike, but it seems like this story is alluding to the fact that they're back and that they were, at least by last year, back in business and back on the same page and past that stuff.
Right.
But Ellis is still holding on to whatever reason he doesn't want Mike back. And part of what Les was saying, and Les's co-host, I know we're quoting a lot of this, but it's been the most fascinating thing I've listened to in the aftermath of people talking about this. He seems to have known a lot about the subject. Is he was saying that Ellis wanted McDaniels because he thought he could control McDaniels, and then he realized that he couldn't and had to fire him. That's interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, especially when, you brought in Brian. What was our GM?
Brian Xanders.
Brian Xanders. Okay. So I wanted to say Xander and I knew it was wrong. Xanders. Okay. He waved to me, by the way, when he came in the tunnel at the Broncos.
Oh, nice.
Like, oh yeah. Nobody paid attention to him. I was the only one that was like, "Ooh, that's Brian Xander." Cause most people were looking for the players, but that was my one Brian Xanders moment. But anyway, so that makes sense that he would bring in the GM and have Josh focus on coaching to compartmentalize them and probably Ellis take more control. And then lost control of McDaniels and had to fire him. But one of the things with Mike is he ran the team.
Yes.
But that maybe Mike wanted to come back and just be coach and let John be GM. And doesn't that sound perfect?
That does. Yes, because before Mike Shanahan was ultimately fired, he held the role of not only head coach, but he was also, I believe, one of Elway's roles as vice president of player operations or something like that, or personnel operations, something. Shanahan had that exact role once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. He was in control of the roster. It was him building the team. So when we talk about like the Jay Cutler draft and that 2006 draft class, that was all John Elway, Brandon Marshall, or not John Elway, excuse me, Mike Shanahan, Brandon Marshall, Mike Shanahan pick, Elvis Dumerville. You get the picture. So yes,
Tony
Shanahan had
Scheffler,
that.
baby.
Huh?
The great forgotten Tony Scheffler.
Tony Scheffler, the trade for
88.
Javon Walker. That
Yep.
all happened in one draft class, man. Chris
Yep.
Cooper. Come on.
I mean,
That's an
he brought
all-time
us.
underrated draft.
It is. It is. I mean, and freaking Shanahan brought us Champ Bailey, man.
Champ Bailey, the trade for Champ Bailey. He did for all of his shortcomings defensively, the guy had an eye for offensive talent.
Yep. Yep.
He really did.
Right. And there's a lot of talks right now about comparing Shanahan's last several years, and that's a whole nother thing, and we could get into that. And I'm sure this Shanahan thing is probably not going away, so I'm sure we'll talk about that. But also, it's worth noting that Shanahan never wanted RG3 and was forced into that decision, which also screwed them in the draft pick department and didn't allow Shanahan to build the team that he wanted. And he almost took him to the playoffs. So I think it's easy to look at that stats on paper and forget the story that was surrounding everything, which changes the color of a lot of it. But yeah, this is fascinating, man. And there's seems to be so many layers to it, so many different things that it adds extra context that may help us see clearer in these other ways about some of these other things. Is that the reason we didn't have Kyle Shanahan as our coach? That whole thing, that makes a lot of sense. If he didn't like his dad, he probably wouldn't want his son coming in, because not only maybe would he not just has a problem with the Shanahans, but maybe he thought his dad would be around more.
Right.
If he's the coach. So I mean, this is interesting. I'm really fascinated to see what this does going forward, because I think this will affect in some way. I think this is going to affect the legal battle for the team that's going on. I think that this is going to affect John Elway's standing, as far as I think it reinforces his position, and most importantly, in the minds of fans. I think that it's almost an elitist mentality if you're in control of the team, where you got to say enough that the fan opinions matter, but then you do what you think is best, right? There's a degree of that where yes, you say what matters to the fans is important, but really they think they know what's best for the Denver Broncos. And that was what they did when they chose Vance. Is we didn't go with Kyle because we felt like this was the best move for the Denver Broncos. These stories in this context really shines a spotlight and exposes that as bullshit. They are not doing what's best for the Broncos. There seems to be a lot of human ego and personal reasonings completely separate from what's best for the team and what is in the desire of the fans. There seems to be a huge disconnect between the trust and Broncos, the high up Broncos echelon of control outside of Elway. And I think that's what Elway maybe potentially, if he's involved, brilliantly did in this situation, is separate himself from everyone else that's the power players in this. Is he said, look, yes, I may be in this upper tier. You're all mad at the people at the top making the decisions, but let's compartmentalize this. I'm over here and I wanted what you wanted. This reconnects Elway to the heartbeat of the average Denver Broncos fan. I wanted to bring Mike to you, and Mike would have brought us Kirk. That's what you all wanted in the offseason. We settled with Case. Maybe that's why Elway went so quick after Case, because he knew getting Kirk was going to happen through Mike. And if he didn't get him through Mike, he wasn't going to get him. Maybe that makes that situation make more sense.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes it make more sense, because it seems like they were never really in the running. You remember Kirk Cousins' blog post that he put out when he put those hashtags at the bottom. Yeah,
Doesn't that
Denver
make that
wasn't in it. Yep.
We
Denver
weren't
was
even mentioned
never in it.
because Denver
Nope.
was the choice when Mike was going to be the coach.
Yep. That every single one of these dots has been connected by this one story, by this one piece of information that's
Which
come
further
out.
validates.
That it
Yep.
does. It does. And it validates what the big picture plan that John Elway has of getting the Denver Broncos back to winning. Because winning right now, nobody would be talking about the ownership situation if the Broncos were winning games.
Mhm.
Fact. Absolute fact. Nobody talks about the dysfunction of the Indianapolis Colts anymore. Why? Because they're winning games.
Mhm.
Last year at this time, it was all about how poorly managed Andrew Luck was and how they couldn't build a winner. They just failed to hire the head coach they wanted. They had to go with their backup coaching option. They had to do this. They had to do that. They didn't make the right pick with Quentin Nelson in the draft. Everything the Colts did was wrong is essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And now
Right.
they look like they might win the AFC. I mean, my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen to them over the course of the next few weeks, but it's going to be hard to stop Andrew Luck. I know that. So
And no one's talking about the dysfunction, which is your point. And
exactly.
this is where Ellis and the trust, in order for people to believe, and people to believe is the smaller problem for them. They do want fan sentiment, which they've lost, but they also need to apparently prove in courts with this situation that's going to drag out and it's going to be nasty. They have taken the position that they're doing what's best for the team. And it doesn't seem like that is true, which is going to give fuel to his accusers and to their enemies that want to claim the throne.
Yep.
This
So do
gives
you think
them,
that Elway's on the side of those Bolin children?
I think that he's employed by the enemies of the Bolin,
Yeah.
the outcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another thing that's really important in this whole thing to consider is Ellis. Ellis is also functioning as proxy for Bolin's wife, and she does not want Bolin's child from a previous marriage to be the one that takes the team, where the trust seems to be leaning toward her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, welcome back to Game of Thrones. You're talking about the one that the brother is siding with, that's trying to go, that's ready. She's ready. She's been ready. She wants to run the team. She wants to keep it in the family. She's made it clear. The trust is saying we want the daughter, the young daughter who's not ready. And that's the daughter of his current wife. When you're talking exes and step kids and all that kind of stuff, it's complicated and it's freaking messy, man. And sometimes your children that you have with your husband, the newest relationship, the newest marriage, those kids have an extra special thing because they're the offspring of your working marriage. And the ones that aren't, that came from the marriage that failed, there's like a stigma that it's the stepchild, man. I don't think she wants her stepchild in control of the team when they can wait it out and her kid could be in control. Now, again, this is all I'm theorizing here based off of Game of Thrones dynamics and being in part of a blended family myself. So factoring in a lot of different assorted layers to try to see if I can, line these things up and see a different picture. But that all kind of makes perfect sense. So this is where this whole situation is crazy. And what they needed to happen is they need people to not be focusing on them or their mismanaging of the team. This article makes them look really bad. They want to be able to keep control until whatever they want to happen happens, whether that's them selling the team, whether that's the daughter taking over, that they want the spotlight off of them and on a winning team. And that's not the case. And in fact, the spotlight has been shined and exposed upon them for maybe being the reason the team's not winning. That's not what they want to bring into these court cases. That's not what they want fan sentiment to they don't want the fans in that frequency where they're looking at them as villains, because they're trying to not be seen as the villains and trying to discredit the ones that are taking claim to the throne.
Man, you're right. There's so many layers to the story. It's just fascinating. Like we've said, I don't know how many times. It's fascinating on every single level. Every part of this is interesting, from the ownership all the way down to the quarterback.
This is all fascinating if you don't like football.
Yeah, it is. It's drama at its finest, and it's happening with our team, with the Denver Broncos.
And what did we say from almost episode 1 and almost every episode since? The thing about the Broncos that you can always say about our organization is we have just about the best storyline almost every year.
Yeah. Yep.
Whether it's a good one or a bad one, the one that you write the movie on almost every year is the Denver Broncos. There's always something going on that's storybook.
Yes.
And here we are again, perhaps at the juiciest point.
It really is. It really is, because now we haven't even really touched on, well, what's going to happen next? Because what does happen next from here? I mean, like we talked about a little bit, is Mike Shanahan. Vance is going to be fired at the end of the season. We can first
figure out the things that we know. Vance is gone. Whether that's this week or later, but reports are saying it's going to be at the end of the season. That's fine.
Yes.
We talked about that in the last episode, that maybe you don't fire Vance to the end of the season because there's nobody better in house to replace him with. That's fine. Let's get over that. We're not going anywhere this season. Whether it's Vance or somebody else, it's not going to change anything. So, or I mean, that's arguable, I'm sure, but it's not going to change much. So Vance is gone. What else though?
Yep. So Vance is gone. I think that along with him, I don't think Musgrave is going to be back. I don't think Joe Woods is going to be back.
They're going to blow up the coaching staff.
They're going to blow up the coaching staff. I think there's a couple
losing Vance, but it's just about as guaranteed, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple coaches from this staff that deserve to stick around. I mean, we can get into that in a later episode, but we're just going to take the major talking points here. So I think obviously Vance is gone. Musgrave and Woods are probably going to be gone. And then I think that we're going to see some interesting, it could get interesting at the quarterback position. Could get really interesting at the quarterback position, because Case Keenum is due a $21 million cap hit next year. And he signed for $36 million. I think 20 million of that, or 20 some million of that was guaranteed. So he's got quite a bit of guaranteed cash, and the cap hit this year was bumped down so that the Broncos could, afford everything that they wanted this year to be able to fit it under the cap. But next year it goes up to 21 million, and it's a $10 million dead money hit if they release him or trade him, which is a lot. I mean, that's the increase in the salary cap roughly of what the NFL does every single year. And so with that being said, there was something that Mike Kliss said today on the Orange and Blue 760. He was talking about kind of the offseason pie in the sky, is what he called it, blueprint for the Broncos. And the first thing was to bring in an offensive mastermind, whether as a coordinator or head coach, and then also to draft a quarterback. And he inadvertently hinted to that being a first round player. And so what the plan would be is something similar to what the Browns did this year with Tyrod Taylor, or is it Tyrod? I don't know.
Tyrod.
T Taylor, Tea Time from Like Mike, Tea Time. They wanted Tea Time to play a couple games, and then when Baker was ready, they would put him in. And I think the Broncos are maybe going to employ a similar strategy. They've got a defense that can compete. They can keep their heads above water if a quarterback can just make just enough plays. So I think that they're going to kind of move on to that new era sooner than later. But it seems like these things are moving along behind the scenes a lot quicker than it looks in the public eye. Just based on, if Kliss is saying it publicly, it's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Not that he knows every single thing. Like, obviously, he wasn't reporting what Woody Page reported before Woody did, which I find this funny, too. This is kind of a side rant, but isn't it funny how every reporter acts like this was their beat after Woody puts it out there? I just find that hilarious.
But you weren't the ones that said it. You weren't the ones that had the gall to put it out there, put it on the line. He had heard it a while back, too. got the confirmation and blew the freaking world up. But yeah, everyone's like, "Yep, I knew this."
Yep.
Yeah, well, you didn't say it. You weren't the guy that brought it to us. That was
Yep.
Wild Woody.
The Wild Woody. Wild Woody. You never know what he's going to do. He was the one who broke the news about Kubiak long before it happened.
Yeah.
And Peyton Manning, as a matter of fact. So he knows what he's talking about. But
He's been doing it for like
anyway,
4 years.
He has. So we're going to get a new head coach. What do you think that this story about Mike Shanahan really says about what Elway is going to emphasize in the coaching search?
Well, I think this year has changed a lot. I think even more so, I think greatly so, this idea of we're in a new era has hit hard this year.
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers, not going to make the playoffs.
Yep.
Fired Mike McCarthy. Okay. Brady just scored freaking 10 points or whatever.
Yeah.
You've got the changing of the guard that's happening quicker than I think people thought.
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes has lit the league on fire. The only kind of older quarterback that's really consistently getting the job done is Breeze.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, total side note, but by the way, that's who I'm pulling for freaking Breeze to go in and get another ring and finish his career off with the ring. That's now my playoff.
That'd be cool.
That's my playoff team. I'm hoping for the remainder now that we're officially eliminated.
That would be cool.
But anyway, it seems like there's a transition and a switch to. I felt like maybe 6-7 years ago there was a soft transition where we started to get like the RG3 Kaepernicks, but it was like there was almost like an old man mentality of like, oh, but this new thing's going to get figured out. I think this is the first year that really shifted people's awareness that the new college way is going to take over the NFL. The Patrick Mahomes way is the new way. And this is going to be a new league of offensive creativity. And I think the door has been kicked wide open, specifically, I think, by Mahomes, that it's time for a revolution. And I think that there's college coaches and creative outside the box thinking that's just going to be red hot in this off season and in the coming off seasons. So it almost seems to me like now the hiring of Mike McCarthy or the hiring of even Mike Shanahan, it seems like this season that's less appealing than it would have been last offseason because I feel like the transition really happened this year where it went from a potential fad to the next new thing. I could be wrong. That's the general feel that I'm getting from this year's season. And so I think that if you're John, I think John is not the quickest to adapt because there's a little bit of John Elway arrogance because he has won and knows how to win that he thinks he knows the way. But I think that we've also seen a side of John where John's willing to adapt and John sees the game changing. So I'm very interested to see where we stand. We're in reboot time. It's not reload time. Everyone's been saying that. It's time to reboot, not a soft reboot. We have the kids we got last year, but it's time to build off the kids and not build off the vets. It's not time to add to the vets. It's time to build off the kids. So I see maybe the best decision being creative revolution with the pieces that we have. And I don't know if a Mike Shanahan or Mike McCarthy or even maybe John Harbaugh more. I mean, he's not going to get fired now that he's kind of doing well at the end of the stretch and might make the playoffs. But I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. I think John looking across the aisle and seeing Kyle leading the Niners, he's wondering if the leader of men thing was what he should have been, whether the strengths of Kyle Shanahan greatly outweighed the potential weaknesses he saw in his inability to lead the vets. and regrets the fact that he chose the leader of men over the guy that was going to develop into the better coach. So I think maybe you start with the guy that maybe you bring in the young guy to pair up with our young kids instead of the leader of men to pair up with our vets.
Yeah. I like that idea. I think that if you could combine, ideally, if you could combine somebody who has experience as a coach in the NFL. I mean, I don't know. From my vantage point, this is kind of what I read into it. It's that John Elway's greatest success in Denver has always come from the sure thing. I mean, if you look back, what's his first move as the president of operations or whatever his title was initially? His first move was to go hire John Fox. And John Fox was coming off of a horrible year, but he was a proven commodity in the NFL. I mean, you knew what you were getting in John Fox.
He brought stability.
He did. And I was thinking about this the other day. I never thought about it like this before, but John Fox did just as good a job in Denver as Andy Reid has done in Kansas City, if not better. He led the Broncos to the Super Bowl, at least in a way. And so obviously that was Peyton Manning's ship, but Fox Fox did a lot of the building with that team. He was a big reason, I would say, for what the success they had. So Elway brings in Fox, and then year 2, he brings in Manning and says, we're not going to go with a young quarterback. We're going to go with arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. Obviously he was a bit lucky there, but still, I mean, that was a great year for quarterbacks in the draft. The 2012 draft, I mean, how many great quarterbacks come from that class, at least in terms of how many from just one specific group? You're looking at Andrew Luck, RG3, Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, a lot of really good players in the NFL today. Elway said, no, we're going the free agent route. And he picked Peyton Manning. And then you look just at all these different moves. Look at 2014 after they lost the Super Bowl. What did he do? He went out and signed DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, traded for Emmanuel Sanders. He did not bring in young players. He went for the proven veteran guys. And when it didn't work after 2014, what did he do? Goes for the experienced head coach in Gary Kubiak. Been there, done that.
So can we lure a creative young offensive coordinator in to potentially groom as the quarterback of the future with some stability of more of a veteran coach? Is that kind of what you're leaning toward?
That's exactly it. I just don't know. I don't know who's out there this year who would be that, who would be the qualifier for that.
Mike McCarthy's not signing a short-term deal.
No.
And I don't know if that's the right move for us.
And does he innovate? What's the reason he was let go from Green Bay? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's troubling to me. I mean, and now that DeFilippo from Minnesota had all that success in Philadelphia, now he's fired from the Vikings before even 1 year's up. And he had all those pieces to work with. So that gives you obviously a reason for pause for saying, well, he was supposed to be this next big head coach. Like before this season, I was counting him as arguably the number 1 head coaching candidate this offseason for any team. And now it's like, well, is he even going to be a hotly pursued offensive coordinator? Because
I found the answer.
Yeah, you did.
Not that I'm the first, but it's Jim Harbaugh. He's the best of both those worlds.
He really is.
Let's brainwash him. And
a lot of success in the NFL.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, that's wishful thinking. That would be my favorite path forward. But yeah, that's probably, I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. Probably not. But outside of that, I don't know, man. You're right. I don't know. I don't know if there is that veteran answer. And has Elway learned maybe enough from recent experience that you need a young, innovative person to create a new vision for where this offense needs to go, that stabilizing it with a veteran guy is not going to do.
Right. Right. Are you going to slip into that pattern that they just fell into, saying that they need more than anything, they need control of the locker room? Or are you going to just change the culture completely?
You need to.
I think so.
You have young leaders in the building. We're not
Right.
lacking leadership from our young guys. One of the best things Elway did this year was not just nailing the draft class, but you brought in young leaders.
Yeah.
So you can afford to build a new culture. Who was it? It was your interview with Bradley, where Bradley Chubb was talking about, oh, I love this because I felt like I was in this situation in college where we kind of came in and changed the culture. Bradley and the young players on this team are excited about coming in and changing the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
you need to embrace that. And I think you need to bring in a young coach and maybe pair him with an older, maybe do the freaking Rams approach of get this young, innovative head coach in, let him grow into that position. Let him innovate our offense with the weapons that we have, because we do have weapons, and figure out something. Draft your quarterback, figure out the guy you want, and pair him up with an older veteran D coordinator that knows the ropes and can help that transition smooth out, can bring that veterancy from that angle. I would love that to happen. Either that, or you do get are we going to be able to lure a great genius creative person to just come in and be the OC of the Case Keenum led offense?
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that being the case, because then you look at even the 2016 or 2017, it was 2017 Rams. I mean, they were no coach's first pick for the job. That wasn't, I mean, Kyle Shanahan, in hindsight, what he would be doing wonders with that unit. But why did the Rams not have much success luring a head coach? I mean, obviously Sean McVay is a great candidate, but there's a reason why nobody was talking to Sean McVay during the 2017 coaching search. The Rams had to think out of the box because that was such a horrible organization at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And McVay went in and he saw the pieces and the potential, and he changed the culture.
Yep.
As a 31, 32 or whatever the heck he is, he's so young. He's the youngest head coach in NFL history at the time. And
So if you tap into the yearning of what the Broncos want and what they probably need, you seem to have an answer.
Yeah.
Which is what we're talking about. The problem now is going to be, is the upper echelon in touch with that frequency. And the scary thing for Broncos fans right now is they seem to be very out of touch with us.
Right.
We can't trust them. And what Elway, kind of bringing this all full circle, well, the best thing Elway may have done if he was involved in this is separate himself from the out of touch people and let us know that he's in touch with us.
Yes. And I wonder if that power move by Elway isn't going to change this thing completely around.
It might give him more control over who he chooses next.
I think so. I think this was a move to say, look, we're going to do a head coaching search here in a couple weeks. Get out of my way. Because
does Ellis double down on and stick his feet and plant his feet and go to battle with John?
That could get interesting, because John Elway will never be anything but beloved by Denver Broncos fans. And especially if he were the victim of something like that, I could just see that going so wrong for those guys. I feel like this is Elway's biggest trump card at this point, in my opinion.
If Ellis makes himself the enemy of Denver Broncos fans and makes himself the enemy of John Elway and loses total sentiment with who matters, the history and legacy of this team, because all of our ex-players that are all still in the building and outside the building and on radio shows, they love John.
Yep.
If anyone's going to choose between the trust and Elway, 100% of our legacy players are all going to go with Elway. Exactly. So you have the history and legacy of the team that you'd be going to battle against. You'd have every single part of what's made Broncos culture the way that it is that would side with Elway in that battle. And then you have all of us that would side with Elway in that battle, or most of us.
Yeah.
So Ellis would be completely turning everyone against him. And in that case, if you're in the Nash, I wonder what other teams and other fan bases are thinking looking at this whole situation. And I know the trust thing isn't as much in their consciousness as it is for us, That's kind of something I think that it's, unless you're in the media, you're not really paying attention to that.
Right.
I know my friends that are super into sports, some of my most knowledgeable sports friends had no clue any of this stuff was going on in the ownership. They knew something, but not nearly any of these details. So I wonder what they're all thinking, because then you put a huge national spotlight on a battle between people that no one cares about running the Broncos in the national media, that people no one cares about, versus Elway that everyone sees as the Broncos. Then you start to change national perspective and not just Denver Broncos fans and Elway perspective. Then all of a sudden, the league is paying attention to the fact that Ellis has turned against everybody. And then what does the league do in this situation when Ellis and the trust asked for the league to step in on their behalf? How much is the league going to choose Ellis over Elway? This is some good stuff, man.
It is. It is really good stuff. It really makes you think. I mean, it really makes you think about what's
a lot
happening.
Of hypotheticals.
It is a lot of hypotheticals, and I think that the first step in determining what's going to be going on here in the near future, who really holds the cards, is how much control Elway has over this new coaching search that's about to happen.
Right.
You know, it's got to be Elway's guy.
He's trying to unshackle his hands, man.
Yep. And if Vance wasn't Elway's guy, man, that's it.
Vance was kind of Elway's guy.
He was.
But it was yeah, it seems now that Elway wanted to correct that mistake sooner than he was able to.
Yes.
And there is somebody this whole time before Elway got here that may be the biggest problem. I mean, who's the number one least liked person in the past 15 years of Denver Broncos?
Josh McDaniels.
Who hired him? Who fired the guy before him?
Yep. Joe Ellis.
Maybe the guy that everyone is angry at has been operating in the shadows in an unknown capacity. And maybe what Elway did, or whoever, again, with our Elway is the mastermind behind this, maybe he brought Ellis out from being the villain in the shadows to the villain in the limelight.
I would say that's absolutely accurate. It feels that way. Just in my gut feeling that I've got, it feels like Elway definitely had something to do with it. And it feels like Joe Ellis was behind all of these different things that we're talking about, behind Kyle Shanahan not being fired, behind the Mike Shanahan, reunion not happening, behind McDaniels. He's behind the firing of Shanahan in the first place.
Behind Elway not coming back as soon as Elway wanted to come back. Why would you block out Elway from coming in and using his economics degree to help the Broncos? Yeah. He only reluctantly and probably at Pat Bowlen's insistence came back. So what part of this, of a lot of these, what good has Ellis done? And this really shines a light on the context of his whole story here. What good has Ellis done besides reluctantly hire John Elway when that may not have even been his decision? And he's the one that's in control of the future of our team, of selecting the next owner. This is crazy.
Yeah. It feels like somebody's trying to shut something down before it gets out of hand, or before Ellis gets too much of a say in these type of things, because there is that big legal battle going on right now. It's an ongoing process, and amidst it all, the team has uncertainty at head coach, at quarterback. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Elway, because I truly believe that John Elway has the best interests of the Denver Broncos at heart.
Absolutely.
I truly believe that.
Absolutely.
I believe that also Joe Ellis is an employee of Pat Bowlen's. I don't know that Joe Ellis bleeds orange and blue the same way John Elway does. And because of that, there are business decisions that are made out of, personal
ego and self-interest.
Yeah, exactly. And
It seems to be what's ruling Ellis more than a love for the Broncos, or even an execution of Pat Bowen's desires, which is exactly what the brother said in his statement. We no
mm-hmm.
longer believe that the trust is acting in Bowen's interest of what he would have wanted, in the heart and the spirit of what Bowen desired.
And what do you think propelled that statement? I mean,
Well, we're learning. We're
did the
learning.
I know, did the Bolin family just find out about this happening? I mean, and if they just learned that John Elway was shut down trying to bring back Mike Shanahan, who was obviously not only a great Denver Bronco, but probably a really great friend of the Bolin family. I mean, there's layers to that to be peeled back yet, because that, like I said before, that was a teary-eyed press conference for Shanahan and Bolin, not just for the fact that it was an end of the, Shanahan era in Denver. It was like a best friend having to part with his best friend. It's what it felt like to
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
And I can only imagine that if they caught wind of he was going to come back, but Joe Ellis said no. Well, that then accelerates, because why did they not bring this to the? I mean, why did they not bring this to the court before this? Why was this? Why now? And so, I mean, I could definitely see this being the case where they just found out about Shanahan, the comeback potential. It didn't happen because of Ellis. All these other things happened because of Ellis.
Well,
They're
and
just
like you
done.
asked earlier, I wonder where Elway stands. You asked me this earlier. I wonder where Elway stands with who he sides with. And
Mm-hmm.
we now know that he has a cold. His relationship with Ellis is iced over. We also know that it was already icy when he blocked him out from coming back and only reluctantly brought him back.
Mm-hmm.
So Elway probably isn't the biggest fan of Ellis, but guess who's in control? The Broncos. Ellis. So if you're Elway and you want to come help the team, you have to play diplomatic with Ellis. You have to
Right.
have at least a functioning professional relationship with him. And it seems like Ellis has blocked Elway from being able to do the things to the Denver Broncos that he needs to do. So I'm very, very curious about whether Elway thinks that this team is more of Pat Bowen's team
Mm-hmm.
if the brother and the older daughter take over and return things to the Bowen legacy of football, or whether or not I don't see any evidence that Elway would trust that Ellis is going to do right.
Right.
But he can never say that publicly. We would not know that. But it seems from the things and the pieces that we can gather that if we had to guess what Elway wanted, it's not what Ellis wants.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But Ellis is his boss.
Yep. So he needs Woody Page to come out and say, and that, gosh, the layers to this, it's crazy. I could definitely see where a theory of Elway being behind the Bolin family in this regard, because this puts Joe Ellis as, like you said before, Broncos country's public enemy number one.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody's under more pressure to make sure things go well now than Joe Ellis.
I mean, and how many lukewarmish fans just either heard Ellis's name for the first time in a long time or heard it for the first time by clicking the link that Elway wanted to bring Shanahan back. The different tiers of Broncos fandom. Sometimes there's a lot of fans that I wouldn't say they're lesser fans. They just have different levels of how much they want to dig into these things or how much they're keeping up, depending on how their lives are. There's no judgment. If you're a fan that is hearing of Ellis for the first time, doesn't make you any less of a Denver Bronco fan, but there are fans that don't pay that close of attention. And when they see this, now they're looking and they're aware Ellis doesn't want the spotlight to be shined upon him. He doesn't want that. This is changing the consciousness, the awareness of Broncos fans, the general feelings and sentiments of Broncos fans to despise somebody that preferred to be in the shadows, seen as somebody that's doing the best for the Broncos from the shadows. He's now been brought into the spotlight for one and brought into the spotlight as a villain.
It's not good for him. It's not good for him, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get better. I mean, that's the whole thing of it, is how does this get better for Joe Ellis now? Just by simply giving control to John Elway.
He doesn't want a public battle against Elway when he's about to fight a battle in the courts.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to minimize. He's going to have to shrink, and he's going to have to revert to, he's going to have to do whatever he can to save public perception of him not being in the way of progress, of us getting back to glory.
Right. Because John Elway can't worry about that stuff when he's trying to put together the best possible team. When he's trying to assemble these things, he can't worry about, oh, well, I don't think Joe Ellis is going to go for this. Well, you know what? You're talking about Kirk Cousins coming at a discounted rate. You're talking about Mike Shanahan coming back. You're talking about Kubiak being the offensive coordinator. Joe Ellis is probably the only person in the world who that doesn't sound like a good idea to.
And what would have helped him in court is probably us having a better year this year.
Yep, absolutely.
So by blocking that out, he's actually put himself at a disadvantage because now he's more in the spotlight from that. So this has completely backfired for him.
Yeah. It's insane. It's so crazy. When you sent that article to me, I think I was just kind of waking up, or I was just
You reacted to it at about 5:30 my time.
Yeah. I
saw it when I went to bed. I went and checked Twitter real quick, got off my video game, hopped out of Fallout 76, laid down, popped my Twitter open real quick, and it had just dropped within like a minute. I was like, I read it. My mind was blown. My eyes were wide as they could be, tired, needing to go to sleep. And I texted to you, texted to my dad, and I passed out.
And then here we are now.
You woke up to it, and wow.
Just blown away. I mean, this has taken off. Everybody in Denver is talking about it. At least on my Twitter feed.
I woke up and my timeline was beep, all of it.
Yep, everything is Mike Shanahan.
Show, every podcast, it's all the coaching situation that never was, that could have been, and why wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine being the reason why Denver had no shot at Cousins, or why they don't have Shanahan and Kubiak running the show again, just like the good old days?
Right.
It's a tough spot for Joe Ellis, and I firmly believe in my heart of hearts, and I can't confirm this factually, but I firmly believe that Elway was behind it.
Yeah.
He had to be. No,
he's
this
benefited the most from
out.
it.
Yeah.
He's benefited. That's I mean, that doesn't mean, that's not conclusive, but one can assume or surmise or theorize that Elway came out of this the best, and that he may have had a hand in getting himself into this reinforced position.
Yeah. Because this information, like we said, these people have been sitting on it for a while. They've been sitting on it, trying to confirm with multiple sources.
And they made it clear. Woody made it clear, and other people made it clear that now that we're out of the playoffs, the Canaries started singing.
Yep. Isn't that convenient timing? Playoffs are out of the picture. Next day, boom. Actually, same day as we're out of the playoffs, the news drops
within 24 hours for sure.
Yeah, within 24 hours. It's not a coincidence. All this stuff happens for a reason. Everybody, let's pull the veils aside here.
Yeah, this seems like an Elway power play, that as soon as it was official and we're out of the playoffs, he pressed the red button.
Yep. And this was his the big red button that he's needed for a year.
This was the power play that he needed to hit to exit the season and have the most leverage going into the next offseason.
Yeah, he nailed the draft. They got an unexpected gem with Philip Lindsay. They competed for a while, but didn't play well enough for Vance Joseph to keep his job. It's going to be justified for him to be fired based on the expectation in Denver is, I mean, look at John Fox, division titles, AFC title, fired. And Vance Joseph has missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. So obviously the standard has not been met,
We could
and
finish 8-8
therefore
and beat the Chargers again, and Vance is done.
agreed.
He's done.
Agreed.
There's no chance. He's done. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and this, and then obviously that was the case, but I mean, we really, really, really know now that when they were already going to pull the trigger and take him out last season, and they were already trying to find an exit and kind of reluctantly went with him because of drama and ego, Vance is done. There's no chance, 0% chance Vance is our coach beyond as soon as week 17 is over, Black Monday or whatever it is, at the very latest, he's gone.
Yep. And that's going to really open up the floodgates. I mean, and I have to imagine if John Elway is pushing this red button, and I shouldn't say that as though it's fact. I'm not going to try and put words in Elway's mouth or anything. If John Elway is the one who pushed that button, there's got to be some kind of plan in mind here. I mean, if you're bringing this out into the open, you don't do that unless you have a good plan in place. Or at least something in mind.
This feels calculated.
It does. And why not? It's John Elway. I mean, he was a great gunslinger, but the guy knew how to, he knew how to get it done in the clutch. And the Broncos they're down right now. They're not an embarrassment, I wouldn't say, but
this is the beginning of the drive.
It is.
What it feels like is we are backed up. We're backed up. We're backed up. And it's time to drive. And that's where John, a fire has gotten lit inside of John. He's like, I'm going to do what it takes to save the Broncos, even if that's saving it from the powers that be that rule it. If the leaders got to be dethroned, I'm going to take them out. And John has gone, if John released it, John has gone to war with Ellis and the trust. In a way that isn't direct open warfare, but it's end game warfare. Avengers freaking end game. John Elway edition, baby. It's coming.
He's got the fist. He's got all the Infinity Stones, and he's ready to go.
He's collecting the stones, baby.
Yep.
And he's about ready to snap his fingers and freaking resurrect our team from the apocalypse, man.
I love it. I can't wait to see what happens next, as usual.
Well, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be dissecting it. We got an interesting offseason. This was the really kind of the beginning, inaugural kickoff of the offseason. Now that it's officially, there's no playoffs for the Denver Broncos. The 2018 season is over. There was lots to love, but we didn't get the job done. Vance didn't get the job done. Elway didn't get the job done, but there may be some very interesting things happening, and there may be some power plays going on, and there may be a plan to resurrect the Denver Broncos that John Elway may or may not have put into motion in the past 24 hours. And it's going to be exciting to watch. It's going to be another, I know we talked about it a lot about last year being a make or break offseason, and this is a different kind. It's not a reloading. Can we get these things to click that we already have? I think it's a totally different transition into the Broncos have to become something new. And part of that may be shaking off and taking the scepter away from Joe Ellis. John needs to take power. And we thought he was. Little did we know that, or maybe many people did, but now it's been brought into the grander social consciousness of Broncos fans that there's a greater war at play and that John Elway is playing to win.
Well said.
I'm ready, dude.
I'm ready too.
My seatbelt strapped on. We got an off. We're in the playoffs now, baby. It's we're battling a different war behind the scenes. We're playing the long game, man. And it's time. We cannot shrink into obscurity any further than we already have. We've become irrelevant in the NFL, and we were Super Bowl champions within a little over 2 years ago. So it's time. 3 years ago, it's time. We need to regain control of this team, and we need a resurrection. We need to arise like a phoenix from the ashes. And I'm ready, man. I know you're ready.
I'm always ready. I mean, I hate losing more than I love winning. You know, I can't stand like that, like the Cleveland game. That drives me absolutely crazy.
Especially when our very first episode that never was us just gushing over how bad we wanted Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. Yep. And he looked. My goal for that game for the Broncos was for him to look like a rookie, and I think that he did.
Yeah.
But he made those 1 or 2 plays when we made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
When the Broncos made mistakes, he took advantage, and he was the one beating his chest, and he was the one doing the interview with the NFL game day crew at the end of the game, and he was the one getting the Cleveland crazies all pumped up after the game. And
we lost and got knocked out of the playoffs by the quarterback we wanted and the coach we wanted.
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row.
Isn't that crazy?
And John Lynch.
Isn't that crazy how that all works out?
Storybook, man.
It is storybook. And
there's no one we love going more into the season than Baker. He put the nail in our coffin. Yep. And the week before that, we lost to the head coaching candidate that we should have hired. I mean, could it line up any better? We didn't lose to Kyle earlier in the season. We didn't lose to Baker earlier in the season. Those are the 2 teams that poured frickin' the ice bucket challenge over our heated, hot Broncos that had beat 3 games in a row, and 2 of them were freaking really good teams.
Yeah.
One of them, as much as it pains me to even talk about the possibility of this, the Chargers might be going to the freaking Super Bowl. Something they don't do. Something that we have made fun of them that they can't ever do. That may happen, and we beat them.
Yeah.
Only to lose and get knocked out of the playoffs by the coach we should have hired and the quarterback that we wanted.
Ugh.
Wow.
That's a great point. That's going to be one of the snips. That's got to be a snip right there. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than that. You know, you talk about different stats for Vance Joseph over the course of the past couple years, streaks that he's broken that should never have been broken, like, you know, losing to Cleveland for the first time in 46 years. I think it boils down simply to this: head to head, face up.
Yep.
You're going up against the coach that we should have hired over you. You lose.
Beat him.
You're going up against the quarterback that we, you know, coveted but couldn't get. You lose. I mean, that's it. That's it right there. You failed against the people
we even lost to the other quarterback we could have had too, in Sam Darnold.
Exactly. Badly. That was the worst loss of the year, was to Darnold.
Yep.
And that I put it this way in one of the articles that I recently wrote. That game is going to be looked at by Jets fans as the game throughout the course of this whole season. They're going to look back to that game over the course of the entire offseason and say, all right, this is the guy we want Sam Darnold to be. And it happened against our team.
Against the no-fly.
Oh, brutal. Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Wow. Well, great episode. Lots of I feel like still we've just been skirting around the tip of this iceberg that I feel like there's just so much more, and more is coming. There's so much more that we don't know, but what a fun time trying to dissect and understand this Game of Thrones.
It is. I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see what the Broncos have in place. Who they might interview for the job that they have, you know, soon to be coming available. It's going to be a wild offseason yet again, because you're talking about another shift at head coach, talking about another high impact move at quarterback. And now you've added in, it's an overhaul, a complete overhaul.
Vision overhaul. We talked about the problems with the Broncos early in the season. We don't have a vision of who this team is. We don't have it, and whatever vision is leading this team is not in harmony with Denver Bronco football. We need to restore the vision. And who else is going to do that, leading the team in any position of power, than John Elway?
Yep.
That is why he is not the problem, but Elway is making himself the solution.
I love it. I love it. He's not playing the victim in this whole ownership game, Game of Thrones, as you've called it. He's not playing the victim. He's not going to quit just because it's hard. He's taken, I mean, you talk about that 4th and 1. I mean, Elway's like 4th and 1. No, 4th and 11. We're going for it. I don't care.
Yep. Right.
That's Elway. He doesn't care. He believes he can get 12. He believes he can get 1 or 2. It's just, that's how he's always been. Doesn't matter how many yards.
And a picture of just Elway watching the plays that we're watching.
Oh, did you see the video? The first time I've ever seen him visibly upset on camera during a game was this past game. Not just like, you know, a sullen face or like, you know, just like he was actually cussing at his Microsoft Surface with Matt Russell. I've never seen that before. Wow. I've never seen him give that kind of emotion during the game. He knows the cameras are on him. Yeah.
Good.
I like it. He's probably mad watching Baker.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the first drive of the game, Baker takes his team down, and after we had gone negative 14 yards or something like that, it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And there was nothing he could do about it. If he could put on the number 7, he would. But it's retired, and he's retired, so.
But does he still have a battle to fight from his
position?
He knows he does.
He does.
He knows that if he wasn't there and we were left, Broncos fans that he loves, that respect him and yeah, to a certain degree, kind of just like a lot of the town worships John Elway, and he sees the reverence of that in a way that he wants to do right by the fan base. And if we were left to Joe Ellis's devices, he knows that it wouldn't be good. And he is trying to do what he can from his position without open warfare that would potentially damage his position as our only hope. And he's going to fight for us from where he's at. I know we seem like Elway homers right now, but dude, in John Elway we trust. He's our only hope, guys. This is the sobering reality of where we're at in this situation. Ellis is making a lot of the moves, and he's made some of the worst Denver Broncos moves since he's come to power. Some of our least favorite moments: firing Shanahan, hiring McDaniels, not bringing back Shanahan, keeping Vance Joseph. And Elway, help us, Elway Kenobi. You are our hope.
That's how we need to end this episode. That's too perfect. Help us, Elway Kenobi. You're our only hope.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. As always, we will be back. There is so much ahead. So much to be excited about. So much drama. So much interesting story that's unfolding and happening, as always, with our precious Denver Broncos. And it's always darkest before the dawn. And I hope that dawn is coming. And I hope Elway brings it to us. And I hope his greatest drive is ahead of him. So this is Sayre Bedinger and Brandon Keckler, thanking you again for spending your precious time with us. And as always, God bless and go Broncos.